Hey Eagles fans, this is Mike Kaye from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No Huddle Show podcast, where we discuss anything and everything Philadelphia Eagles. You can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles, bookmark that, and you can subscribe to our exclusive Eagles Insider Tech service, where we'll break news, give you insider observations, and provide in-depth analysis. Through Eagles Extra, you can send questions and comments directly to us, and we'll respond to your phone. With me today, as always, is my fellow Eagles beat reporter, Chris Franklin. Today, we're going to discuss the Eagles getting healthier, why there are no more excuses for Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson, and we'll also preview the Week 11 matchup against the Cleveland Browns. Chris, how you doing today?
Not too bad. Calmed down a little bit after watching what occurred on Sunday, but overall, not too bad. It's a little chill in the air. It's crazy, man. How you doing?
Well, it's that football weather season, right? Thanksgiving's really sneaking up on us, and we've got a lot to be thankful for, even in 2020. That we've been able to work together, and that obviously we haven't been hit with COVID probably as bad as a lot of people listening to us. So, and we cover football for a living, which is always pretty beneficial. So, it's kind of hard to complain. And if you do complain, nobody wants to listen, I guess. But, the Eagles don't have a ton to be thankful for, other than the fact that they play in the NFC East. And really, that's the only reason why we're able to talk about them in any sort of positive fashion, because in any other year, in any other division, we'd be talking about a top 12 pick. We'd be talking about whether they should be drafting a corner or a defensive end with that pick. We would really be in the minutia of draft season, because frankly, free agency will not be an option for them this year. If anything, free agency is going to become a dumping ground for a lot of veterans who are making a lot of money on this team. So, with that said, with all that positivity, let's kind of get into the fact that this team is getting healthier, as you hear my mic move maybe a little bit. So Zach Ertz had his 21-day practice window activated on Monday off injured reserve. He's still on injured reserve, but he is practicing. We saw him Wednesday. We're recording this before Thursday practice. Isaac Seumalo had his 21-day practice window activated last week. The Eagles ended up holding him and on IR and started Isaac Seumalo started Sua Opeta, the similarly named Sua Opeta at left guard. And the results kind of varied there. Jason Kelce probably had his worst game at center in about at least a year. He had a pretty rough game against the Jets, the one game that the Eagles super dominated last year, but the offensive line didn't play all that well. And then you had Matt Pryor at right guard, who, again, was not very effective. So the offensive line is expected to get Isaac Seumalo back. Nate Herbig was a late scratch because he had a painful finger injury. We've seen him at practice. We're not sure if he's going to play, but having Seumalo at left guard and Herbig at right guard would be advantageous for the Eagles. It would also give the Eagles their week 2 starting lineup, which we haven't seen since. The Eagles have had 8 different variations of their starting offensive line in 9 games. That's obviously not very beneficial to the Eagles or Carson Wentz or the play calling or pretty much anything on offense, which then affects the defense. What do you think would be the bigger... It doesn't sound like Zach Ertz will return this week, but it sounds like he's on pace to return within the next 2 weeks. Who do you think would be the bigger return for this lineup, Isaac Seumalo or Zach Ertz?
Well, I think even though Zach Ertz is, I still believe Zach Ertz can still do a lot of stuff for this team, even for years to come, which segues to thinking they should sign a contract. It's just a whole different story. I think as of for right now, Seumalo definitely would be the bigger pickup and the bigger return for that. Reason I say that is when you have a guy like Sua Opeta, even though it was a spot start and he had to fill in very quickly. If I'm Jason Kelce, I'm worried about who's to my left and who's to my right. That's one less thing that Kelce has to do. And the domino effect just goes along the line. I think when you have Seumalo, I think he's a very powerful. He can help in the run game. I think he's a better pass blocker than everybody else, than all the other guards they have right now currently on this roster. So I believe, besides Brandon Brooks, who's hurt, still recovering from that Achilles. So I believe right now when you have Seumalo, he's going to be able to basically just help out on both sides of the line because I think he can go ahead and you go ahead. I think you don't have to worry about as much. It lets Kelsey focus more on the right side. If it makes more sense. I mean, who do you think's a bigger would be a bigger return?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think the logic's sound there, but for argument's sake, I'd say Zach Ertz just because Zach Ertz commands double teams. And I think even when he's struggling, you have to respect what he's done in the past. And if you don't, you're going to get burnt by him. I think his presence kind of helps you all your other weapons. While he might not put up great numbers anymore, he certainly didn't in the first 5 games of the season. He does, now that you have the guys back in Rager and Fulgham's reemerging or emerging, and then you have Goddard back and Richard Rodgers is playing well. Adding Ertz to that stew is kind of helpful from a coverage standpoint. Might give Carson a little bit more time, might give him some more throwing lanes because safeties are keying in on Zach Ertz. So I'll go with that. I mean, look, I think the offensive line has played horribly at the guard position. Even Herbig, who's been their best guard, has played inconsistently. Isaac kind of struggled when he was in there against the Bengals and the Rams those week 2 and week 3. So I wouldn't even say he gave you a lot to look at. Both he and Ertz struggled before they got injured. But look, I think the money with Isaac Seumalo is that, one, he's going to be here next year. You know that for a fact. Whether, Kelsey is still around or not, Isaac Seumalo is either going to be the starting center or he's going to be the starting left guard. On top of that, he's probably, on top of being the starting left guard, he's probably your best backup option at 4 other positions outside of left tackle. So I think he helps from a depth standpoint. Look, they have 11 offensive linemen potentially. If Isaac comes back, I think they're going to have to make a decision on either Brett Toth or Luke Jariga, who they like very much. So, I do think Isaac really helps. I think both of those guys would be huge for this offense, especially as they go into a stretch where they're facing 5 playoff contenders in 5 weeks. And they really need to beat the Browns. As we transition, look, Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson are getting a lot of flack. I know a lot of people want to pile on Jim Schwartz. We're going to talk about him afterwards. But you and I have different opinions on who's running out of excuses. And I think it's healthy for you and I to debate this. I know that you have been pretty harsh on Carson. Can you explain why you think the excuses are running out for him?
Sure, definitely. You're heading into your 5th year, and I know he's had injuries. I know he's missed time away from the field, but a guy with his abilities, a guy with the arm he has, the guy who we were told when he first came in the league and everybody made a big deal about it, his intelligence, he has a photographic memory. He can remember stuff like this. He can read defenses. He can change out of plays and everything else. If that's the case, why is he still making some very poor decisions when it comes to throwing the ball? Now, don't get me wrong. I thought he did a lot better against the Giants. He threw the ball away a lot more, and he didn't try to force things as much as he did previously in the past. But when you're looking at what you have around you, when it comes to all the injuries, you have a bunch of rookies, you have a bunch of practice squad guys that were called up, you have the offensive line, and you're still making those bad decisions just because you think, hey, I'm going to still be aggressive. You can't do that, especially as the leader of the team, especially as a quarterback. You just can't put your team in a bad position because it dominoes over to defense. You're putting them in bad positions and everything else. You just can't do that overall. He should know better by now, and he still hasn't done it. And it's gotten to the point where I used to be the most optimistic person. Like, oh, Carson, hey, you can do this. Hey, he'll be around for a while. Oh, don't worry, get that. I'm seriously questioning him now, and it's getting it's worrisome. And I know Doug's play calling has been put into question, but he's not the one that's on the field throwing the ball. It's just not do that. I mean, why do you think Peterson's the one at fault? I'm curious to hear your reasoning why Peterson's the one that's wrong.
The Eagles are averaging Miles Sanders is averaging 6 yards per carry. 6 yards per carry. Boston Scott, when he's been in there over the last 3 weeks, has run the ball relatively well. The Eagles are running the ball like 37% of the time, which is in like the bottom 3 or 4 of the league. when you have a quarterback that is struggling, he shouldn't be throwing the ball 40 times a game. It's just not. It doesn't work. I thought, while the numbers were still skewed, I thought they did a better job of sticking with the run later than they typically had. Doug Peterson gave me some razzing for asking a question and being positive.
That was funny.
Which I didn't really understand, but that's him. Look, I think he's been very defensive as of late, and rightfully so, because frankly, some of his decision making has been pretty awful. He's not playing to Carson's strengths. Excuse me. The game plan against the Giants was clearly make Carson a game manager. Well, when you're down by 2 scores, that goes out the window. Instead, it didn't. There was nothing dynamic about the play calling. The entire game was pretty tame as far as finding ways to be creative. I think there were 2 creative plays in the entire game that I outright said, wow, that's a smart move. Look, the wide receivers struggled to get open upon rewatching and just studying up on the game. But I just at what point does Doug Peterson look? You brought up all the billing of Carson Wentz. Well, following that Super Bowl year, this guy, Doug Peterson, was the ballsiest coach. He was the brashest coach. He was not afraid of anything. He was super creative. Well, I got to tell you, I've covered this team since the Super Bowl run, and I think he's been pretty middling. I think he's a great manager of players. I think his players love him. They're never going to quit on him. But frankly, I don't think he's played to Carson Wentz's strengths, and that's an issue. Don't get me wrong. I think Carson has been a nightmare as a decision maker, a nightmare. And so it's hard as a play caller to design plays for a guy who isn't thinking well on his feet. But I do think Doug Peterson could do things to alleviate a lot of Carson Wentz's pressure. He can use him on the run more. He's not a pocket passer. That's just not his game. He could use a lot more crossing routes, which Carson seems to really like throwing tight window throws. He can, use less 12 personnel. Doug even said they noticed during the bye week that 11 personnel is their best running formation, which is unique. Miles Sanders now getting his footing under him. I think they need to run this offense through Miles Sanders. I've said it for several weeks until he got injured. Miles Sanders is the most dynamic player on this offense. You can talk about Travis Fulgham all you want, but he was almost shut down by one of the worst starting cornerbacks in the league in Isaac Yiadom. So I think we need to kind of reevaluate as spectators how we look at Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. Now, moving on, Jim Schwartz, the whole Jekyll and Hyde approach. Look, he even admitted that Daniel Jones ran for a 34-yard touchdown on the same formation that Daniel Jones ran an 80-yard or picked up 80 yards against them in Week 7. That is absolutely unacceptable. I think Jim Schwartz is feeling a little heat right now, and he should be. And if there's a guy who's going to be scapegoated for the season, it's probably going to be him first. I just don't know what here's the thing that frustrates me is everybody's like, well, get rid of this guy. And then you don't have a backup plan. Oh, don't worry. Anybody new will be, they just need new voices in there. Well, it's just not that simple. People do the same thing with Howie Roseman. Like, which general manager candidate are you really, you got your fingers on the pulse of the general manager, market. So look, I think Howie Roseman's going to stick around for another year, whether he deserves to or not. That's a whole nother discussion. But I think when you look at the guys on the ground, the boots on the ground guys, Carson Wentz, Carson Wentz, Jim Schwartz, Doug Peterson, those 3 guys should be feeling some heat. Carson's probably not going anywhere. In order to get rid of him, you'd have a $34 million dead cap hit in a trade. And I don't know if anybody's really hankering to trade for Carson Wentz with the season he's having. So he's probably sticking around. So then you look at defensive coordinator. Look, it's been 5 years, and Jim Schwartz has been as up and down as any coordinator in the league during that time. I mean, I think, his numbers look good, but I think the criticism this year is particularly pointed and particularly on point with him. And, Doug Peterson, the thing is, he won a I'm ready to write the lead. The one man who's led the Eagles to a Super Bowl only lasted 5 years in Philadelphia. Like, could you imagine that? But it's also Philadelphia. So part of me thinks it would be best for both sides to mutually part ways. Doug can easily get a job. But it just kind of seems like right now Carson and Doug aren't vibing from a on the field standpoint. They might have a terrific relationship, and Doug Peterson is constantly defending him to the public. But I just don't know if this is working right now. And I put a lot of that on Doug because he is supposed to be the guy who can relate to a professional quarterback. He's supposed to be the guy who can make creative plays. And I'm not trying to give Carson a pass, but Doug's supposed to be the adult in the room and the innovator and the thought guy. And right now, this offense seems thoughtless. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But the thing that really, see, I think when it comes to Schwartz, though, and going back to Schwartz, I don't know if he's going anywhere. I mean, he was the guy that was, I mean, there was reported that the Eagles were reaching out to him before they even hired Peterson. And I really do think there's something there. They really value his input because even with that, I mean, who else are you going to get as a defensive coordinator that basically is going to run the whole defense that you think Peterson would trust? And I just don't, with as much as much as he has his fingerprints on his defense, it would take about another probably a year and a half, 2 years, I think, to fully get whatever new defensive coordinator to go ahead and do that. And if that happened, I don't know if the Eagles will have enough time to go ahead and they give Peterson enough time. And I think they're both gone, and then it looks bad on Howie. It's just a domino effect.
Well, so I mean, to that point, he's got two defensive coordinators on this staff that probably should get it. I mean, look, Matt Burke has done really well with the defensive line. It would not shock me if Matt Burke was his eventual successor, because they'd probably want to keep Matt Burke away from going with Jim Schwartz somewhere else. And then I think you look at Marquand Manuel, who's got defensive coordinator experience. He would be a minority hire. He did okay in Atlanta as a defensive coordinator until the wheels kind of came off. But then you saw that Dan Quinn's defensive strategies were kind of, falling to the wayside anyway. The issue for them, I think, and again, sorry to cut you off, is they're not going to want to go back to a 3-4 defense. Because like you said, that's going to take a while to kind of, ingrain in this defense with their personnel. But then again, they're going to turn over a lot of guys this offseason, a lot of older players. So, and a lot of the guys are scheme versatile or have played in both looks. So I agree with you. I think it's difficult to just say, hey, get rid of some dude. But
you look tired. I take it the caffeine, toothpaste, and adrenaline face serum aren't working? Well, maybe you should ask Santa for a Nectar mattress this year. And if the big guy brings you another unicorn finger puppet, don't worry, because mattresses start at just $499, and you get $399 in accessories thrown in, as well as a 365-night home trial and a forever warranty. Go to NectarSleep.com today.
I just think
I don't see it. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I just don't. When looking back, even when it comes to Burke and Manuel, I mean, even with that I know Manuel was working under Quinn, and that defense that was always the Achilles heel of the Falcons. And even when he had the reins, it wasn't able to turn it around. And then when you look at Burke, I mean, I think the only thing you get differently and this is just me spitballing. I mean, I'll be honest. When it comes to Matt Burke's defensive coordinator, I'm not that well versed when he calls his play calling. The only thing I think that you would pretty much lose would be the whole sticks defense, the picket fence defense on third downs or third and longs. But if that's the case, that he really is a disciple of Jim Schwartz, I'm not really feeling comfortable with him doing the play calling. If that's the case, you're going to get rid of it. You're either going to have to just tear it down, or you're going to have to live with Schwartz and then try to basically outscore everybody, which I think they have the horses to do on offense. But then you go back to, hey, do you have right? It's one of those situations where you just look at the whole entire situation, just go, either you push the button and nuke everything and just start from scratch, or you have to basically compensate for the one. It's going to be one or the other. To me, it's just like it's going to have to be one or the other. It's going to be, and I think the easier fix would probably be somewhere on the offense and just keep the way the defense is right now. And that's me personally.
No, I get it. I think it's one of those things where, it's a debate amongst fans and fans get kind of riled up. But yeah, when you look at the atmosphere or the market, it's just not easy to kind of put your finger on what you can do. But transitioning from Schwartz to this Browns game, this is a game where I could see a lot of people calling for Schwartz's head if they do not do a specific thing in this game that is so obvious on paper that it's ridiculous. Jim Schwartz called Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt the Eagles' defense's biggest challenge on the ground all season, and he's 100% right. This duo put up 230 rushing yards and a touchdown against the Texans last week. The Browns only won 10-7, but they controlled the clock with that running game. If the Eagles can't get the ball back on offense, maybe that's a good thing, given the turnover issues. But I asked Doug Peterson about it. When you have two running backs on the opposite side who can control the clock, you need to take advantage of every opportunity possible on offense because you don't know when you're going to get the ball back, because that can lead to really long drives. Look, this game is going to really fall on the defense, in my opinion. They really have to stop the run. Jim Schwartz has always said that his first goal is to stop the run. While the Eagles are giving up a lot of rushing yards, their rushing yards on paper are kind of misleading. They're giving up a lot of yards to wide receivers and quarterbacks, but actually with running backs, they're holding them to a pretty respectable 3.4 yards per carry. If they can hold this running back duo under 4 yards per carry, I think they're going to be in really good position to win this game. I think it's just what it comes down to. The weather forecast isn't very pretty. It's going to be that football weather, ground and pound sort of thing. And, the onus is on Jim Schwartz this week, I think, because I think this is a game where you're going to win dirty or you're going to win very close. I have it as a very low scoring game. What says you?
I think it's going to. I agree with it. I think it's going to be one of those. It's going to be one of those early '90s, mid '90s games where you start to see basically it's just both teams running the ball, and then I think you'll see both teams running the ball, especially the Browns, and everything is predicated off of their run. And if the Eagles are able to go ahead, this is going to be the game I think where you look at that defensive line again. You pay them all this money. You're going to have to go ahead and look to see, hey, you know what? Especially those tackles, they're going to have to go ahead and step up and try to go ahead and control those two. I think when it comes to Chubb and Hunt. And if they're able to stop if they're able to stop the run, I think they'll do fine. But that's the problem. I don't foresee that. I know they're stopping the running backs that way too, but I'm worried about Mayfield on the bootlegs. I think, and also not just that, just on first and second down. Like they can't keep putting themselves in 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4s because the running back or the running games go ahead and get 6-7 yards off on the first down when it comes to that. I'm a little worried about Mayfield booting out in the backfield, and then you have a situation where you have him and Duke Riley staring down eye to eye, and I'm taking Mayfield 9 times out of 10 on that thing. So, and then to make matters worse, if they go ahead and get the run, they can go ahead and just go run play action off of it and throw it over top to Jarvis Landry. So it's one of those things where I'm looking right now. Like you mentioned the weather forecast. It's going to be typical Cleveland. It seems like Cleveland winter day. It's going to be dreary. It's going to be possibly rain. It's going to be windy. I'm looking at the way I think they're going to control the running game, and I think the Browns are going to win this game. It's going to be close, but I think the Browns are going to win this game. I think I had like 23-17 or something like that, or 23-20, something like that. But I think the Browns are going to eke it out and just siphon the life force, it seems like, out of it, just continuing to run the ball. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have the perfect Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have constructed a roster that's perfect for that Cleveland weather. They have 3 really good tight ends. They have these 2 ground and pound running backs. Their offensive line's fine. Jack Conklin, their right tackle, is notably on the COVID-19 list because he was a close contact. If he isn't able to play, that's huge news for Brandon Graham, who is obviously on pace for a career season sacks-wise. And look, they're going to need to hit Baker Mayfield. Like, this is going to have to be a game where they're constantly in his face. I do think the defensive tackles can get some rush against this interior offensive line. I do think they are more equipped to handle this running game with TJ Edwards than they are with Nate Gary. And frankly, look, the biggest wide receiver threat, like you said, is Jarvis Landry. He's going to play in the slot. I think you feel a little bit better with either Jalen Mills or Roddy McLeod covering him. It's more of a challenge with the linebackers, potentially on the tight ends. I don't think they're going to be challenged very much on the outside. This could be a situation where you see Avonte Maddox and Michael Jacquet on the outside, or you see Avonte Maddox in the slot, because Jarvis Landry is such a threat inside. So it'll be interesting to see how Jim Schwartz aligns the secondary there. Darius Slay is actually tackled relatively well based on reputation. And then, we flip over to the offense. Look, Myles Garrett's a problem. He is. And I'm looking forward to that matchup. Myles Garrett versus Lane Johnson. They'll move Myles Garrett over to the other side and have rush Jason Peters. Sheldon Richardson's a problem. But I think he's probably a better fit for Kelsey's strengths than, somebody like Dexter Lawrence, who he struggled against mightily. I think offensively, they can get some stuff done. Denzel Ward's a very good corner, but I also think Fulgham can kind of bully him from a size standpoint. Isaac Yiadom was a guy who's a little bit bigger, and that kind of helped take care of Fulgham in that regard. They don't really have a very talented secondary. You've got Andrew Zendejo playing free safety, which kind of helps you from a Dallas Goedert, Miles Sanders standpoint. I'd be trying to match up Miles Sanders on Zendejo pretty significantly. And look, I think if you run the ball well in this game, you've got a shot. I think the Browns, at 6-3 aren't a daunting challenge. I don't think this is a very deep Browns team, but I do think having that home field advantage, having that weather plays exactly into their strengths. And listen, Carson Wentz is going to have to be really smart with the ball. He's going to have to run with the ball. And they're going to have to take some shots in this game. They can't, frankly, the weather's going to be rough, but you've got to be able to set up plays where you can either dump off stuff to Jalen Reagor or you can throw down the field to him. Because frankly, I think part of Doug Peterson's failings is they have not been able to use Jalen Reagor to his strengths. A lot of it has been, at the line of scrimmage. And yeah, he can get you after the catch. He's harder to bring down than most smaller wide receivers, but he's a guy who can also burn it down the field. And we haven't been able to see that, one, because Carson Wentz has been inconsistent with his decision-making down the field, but also because the offensive line hasn't given a lot of time. So, it'll be interesting to see how they do that. The Browns have been susceptible to the screen game. I do think that that's going to be a large extension of the Eagles' attack, which is something that they want to do. They just haven't been able to do. And if they're able to get that screen game going, that could be huge, especially with Boston Scott. We know how proficient he's been in the past when it's come to the screen game and he's had some of those alleys to run through. I think Jalen Reagor on screens makes a lot of sense. What do you see the biggest challenge for this offense being against the Browns defense?
I think the biggest challenge is going to be pointing out where Myles Garrett is. I think that's the main thing, and how they're going to set their protections up that way. I think when you have a guy, I think you mentioned Lane Johnson. I think that's going to be, like you mentioned, that's going to be a good matchup. I'm worried about when he goes against Jason Peters. I think Peters has been playing a lot better as of late, but I'm worried about the speed and the power that Garrett brings around there. I'm wondering, do the Eagles start to go ahead and maybe leave a tight end or do more chipping for going that way too, which I have no problem with, especially if Sanders goes out there. And you mentioned that Zendejo thing. If I'm the Eagles offense, and I'm Carson Wentz, I'm looking at every single time he's matched up one-on-one or not in zone, I'm taking a shot at him no matter what. Absolutely. Struggling or not, I'm taking a shot at Zendejo because his cover, we've seen it when he was with the Eagles. He's a good box safety, but when he goes out into coverage, he's a liability. I mean, that is just bad. And I think when it comes to overall, I think the other challenge is going to be basically playing with themselves and being patient. It's going to be tough. I know they're going to want to go ahead and try to basically when you have Cleveland's offense trying to basically possessing the ball for that long. If they do run the ball, they're going to want to go ahead and try to take shots down the field quickly. You just can't do that. You're going to have to play and slug this out, and it's going to be, I think, a patience. I think Wentz is going to have to be patient enough to go ahead and continue to move the ball down the field. So I think is going to be an issue. I have no problem with I think the Eagles receivers could have a big game, but the main thing is going to be trying to use the receivers in different giving Browns different looks you haven't shown on tape this year. I mean, it's pretty thing. Jalen Reagor, most of his targets go down the field in the middle of the field between the numbers. I think it was like of his 12 catches, 6 of them were in the middle, in between the numbers this year. So teams are going to start seeing that. Why not go ahead and start running them on the outside a little bit more? Running him routes out on the outside a little bit more, and I think Fulgham needs to get more involved a little bit as well too. I have no problem with the way they're rotating him right now, but I want to see Wentz start to spread the ball a little bit more, make a concerted effort to spread the ball a little bit more towards all those receivers. So I think that's the biggest challenge is going to be Garrett, but there are holes in this Cleveland Browns defense.
Yeah, and what I'll say is this, and you know how critical I've been of Alshon Jeffrey and his role. This is the game, okay, that he can be an X factor. The slot screens in the red zone, breaking tackles in this weather, that's the way to do it. That's how he can be effective. That's how he can kind of make his money after he leaves next year. I think, he's a guy that you should really pay attention to because, yes, he's lost some weight, but he's still that big dude that can, run over defenders. And I think in the red zone, he can be a big deal. I think last week was about just getting him used to the speed of the game. He got open a couple of times. We'll see him more effective in this game, I think, especially if they use him in the slot and he can get matched up on a nickel corner or a safety or even a linebacker, really. I think he's a mismatch. So Alshon's going to be a guy that I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing how they use him for once in this game. And I'll be happy to eat crow if he comes out and scores 2 touchdowns in this game.
Or even the fade route. I mean, the jump balls. I mean, if you involve him, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to, say they're at a goal line and it's like first and goal from like the 5-yard line, have he and Fulgham just run fade routes in the back of the end zone and just let them both use their athleticism for a jump ball.
I think
stuff like that would be great.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think look, if you're going to use them, right? So you kind of hinted at your prediction earlier on the show. What prediction or what's the score that you had?
I think I had 23-17. I think the Browns win this game. It's going to be close. It's going to be tantalizingly close. I think at times it's going to be. I think we're going to be talking about this as one of the losses, another loss that the Eagles should have won. I really do. What say you?
Well, I agree with you. I think if the Eagles score less than 20 points, they lose this game. I've got this game as a 20-16 kind of, heavyweight fight. They're going to throw some blows. You're going to see the Eagles will get up in this game and they'll go for 2. They've fallen in love with the 2-point conversion. And frankly, in this weather, I don't blame them with the way Jake Elliott has struggled. I think, this is one of those ones where Carson gets some confidence back. I just don't see how you can stop. Like, if they can't stop this running game, the game's over. You can't let the Browns get ahead of you. So unless the Eagles come out swinging, it's going to be very difficult for them to win this game. So I'm going to say 20-16. There's going to be more chaos in Philly. A lot of people are going to be upset with Jim Schwartz. I think a lot of people are going to be upset with Doug Peterson. And, they'll still be a half game up on the division because the Giants are on a bye. And obviously the Cowboys and the Redskins still are trying to get that third win. So, yeah, I mean, it just – look, in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a must-win game on paper and, like, from a statistical standpoint because it is an AFC matchup. It is, a road matchup, and the Eagles still have, like, a 1.5-game lead. But, they're about to enter this gauntlet of 4 consecutive NFC contenders. They play the Seahawks, they play the Packers, they play the Saints, and then they play the Cardinals. And they really need a confidence boost because they need to win at least 2 of those games, even if they beat the Browns, to kind of feel comfortable with their lead in the division, because they close out with 2 NFC East matchups, and that gives them a little bit of wiggle room. And I just, look, it's been 11 weeks, and the Eagles have not won a day game. And now's the time. This is probably their best matchup of the next 5 weeks. And if they can pull this off, I'm happy to eat crow. I'm happy to say, look, Chris and I were wrong, mostly Chris, though.
Thanks.
Yeah. But look, I think this is a winnable game, and I think the Eagles can do some big stuff here.
Yeah, so it's just really tough. I think when you look at this, I think it's going to be headed toward the holiday. It's going to be a really tough stretch. I mean, there's just too many holes on his team right now that you don't feel confident in. The only thing I think I probably would change right now is the only thing I think is winnable right now are the Browns game's winnable, but I don't know how his team's going to do it this week. And the Saints with Drew Brees' injuries, with rib injuries, and that could be all rectified by the time the Eagles play him by then. You never know. I know Sean Payton's being cagey about his status, but you don't know. We might be having hopefully not, but we might be having a couple of rough podcasts coming up. I think with the schedule coming,
it'll be par for the course. But just remember, you guys can sign up for Eagles Extra on NJ.com/text. You can download the No Huddle Show podcast wherever podcasts are available. For Chris, I'm Mike. We've got to get to practice. We'll talk to you after the game on Sunday. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Get ready for candy. Wall-to-wall, eye-popping, flavor-bursting candy. With Candy Crush Saga, you can enjoy 3 whole weeks of candy celebrations with loads of fun challenges and some sweet, sweet rewards if you top the leaderboards, like unlimited lives. Then on November 20th, finish it with a bang with a gift of unlimited color bombs for 24 hours. Play Candy Crush Saga now to join in the candy celebrations. Download it from the App Store, Google Play, or Windows Store for free. Terms and conditions apply.